Hi, welcome back to the course. Now, till now, whatever we've learned has had to do with the quantity of light. So remember, we've been talking about flash output. So that all relates to how much light is being thrown. That means the volume or the quantity of light. But now is the time that we'll start to slowly move towards the quality of light. And that is going to improve the look of this flashlight on our subject. So it's going to make it more flattering. So we're moving from quantity to quality. So what we'll do here is that first of all, we've got our mannequin here. So we're going to take a few shots with this mannequin, and we're going to be using one of the most important functions that your flash has, and this is one of the functions that really makes an external flash way more superior than your pop-up flash, which is that you can rotate this head. So we're going to be, of course, taking a closer look later on, but first of all, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a normal shot of this mannequin. So imagine that you're shooting an event and you see this person here and you're all set to take the shot. So till now, whatever we've learned is that basically we're going to switch on our flash and then we're going to put it on TTL mode so that we don't really have to do the guesswork and the hard work. And then simply we just take the shot. Don't worry about the settings in the camera right now. Like I said, that will be discussed slightly later in this course. But basically right now what we're doing is we're just taking a normal shot with the flash set to TTL. That's it. And this is actually a what not to do shot. So you should not do whatever I'm going to show you right now. And we're going to be looking at why is this the case. So first of all, let's take the shot. I'm just going to take a normal shot with this flash pointing at the mannequin. Right, so I have got a decent looking shot. Now let's go into our laptop and first of all see why this is the incorrect way to shoot this particular shot. Alright, so this is a shot that we've got, and the first impression that when you see the shot is that this just doesn't look good. Something just doesn't seem right, and what doesn't seem right is actually a type of light called as hard light. And what are the characteristics of hard light? Well, if I just zoom into this image, one of the ways you can spot whether you have hard light or later on, like we're going to see what is soft light. So one of the ways to distinguish between hard light and soft light is to focus on the shadows. So when you see very strong shadows like these, which are very defined, you can actually see where they end and they're very definite in their looks. Then you're talking about like very sharp, then you're probably looking at something which is hard light. And hard light usually has this bad, harsh effect on your subject. Even when you're outdoors, you usually can find this when the sun is usually falling. That's one of the reasons, in photography, it's usually advisable to avoid shooting, when the sun is directly hitting your subject, because it's going to produce something like this. Another characteristic of hard light is when you look at the brighter parts, which are your highlights, and these are going to be very strong and, sometimes so strong, especially in shiny areas or, wherever they're falling, they can be very intense, and these kind of highlights are called specular highlights in photography, which really almost border on going absolutely white. So you get these bad hot spots also, as they're called sometimes, or specular highlights. So you get bad looking strong highlights, you get these very bad looking defined shadows, and this type of light, it just overall is not flattering for your subject. This is called hard light. But the question is, what leads to hard light? And then later on, what leads to a better looking, flattering, soft light? Let's try to understand. Understanding what produces hard light and soft light is a very simple concept. So if there are two light sources and they both are at equal distance to the subject, then the bigger light source will produce a softer looking light, and a smaller light source will produce a harsher or harder looking light, like the shot that we just saw. Now, for example, in the shot that we just took, we fired this flash straight at our subject, and therefore the light source is very small. It's just this big, and therefore it produces a kind of a light which is harsh. So our job as a photographer is to always turn any source of light into a bigger source of light if we want to get rid of those bad looking shadows and the bad looking intense highlights that the hard light produces. So the question is, how can we turn this into a larger source of light? Well, there are a couple of ways to do that. Later on in this course, when we especially when we go towards the off-camera section and we're doing some activities outdoors, we'll find that one of the ways to increase the source of light or increase the size of this flashlight is to use modifiers like these. You must have seen often photographers using these kind of modifiers. For example, this is the shoot-through umbrella. So if I were to fire this flash through this, we go from this small source of light to this bigger source of light in an instant, and that produces soft looking, flattering looking light like we're about to see just in some moments from now. This is also another modifier which is the soft box, and this does the same thing as the umbrella. So anytime you see these different modifiers, they basically enlarge your source of light, and therefore they make it softer and you'll be getting a better looking shot. Now in this video we'll not be looking at modifiers, that's for later on, but in this video, since we are shooting this shot indoors, there's a great feature that your external flash has, which is that it can, you can just move around this head like this in any direction that you want. So what that allows you to do is that you don't always have to fire this flash straight at your subject. Remember, that's a small source of light. So how can we turn it into a bigger source of light when you're indoors? What you can do is just tilt it and fire it off a ceiling or off a wall, because the moment you do that, for example, if I were to fire the shot like this, the flashlight first goes and hit the ceiling, and then the light just spreads around from the ceiling, it reflects and goes all over, and therefore you go from this small source of light and you literally turn your whole ceiling into a big source of light, which produces a very nice looking soft light on your subject, and looks much better and more flattering on your subject. You don't just have to use the ceiling, you can even fire this like we're going to be seeing in some moments from now. You can fire it from this angle so that it reflects from here and goes and hits your subject. So it's almost like a front lighting that you're getting. You're actually creating this front light just by firing it in the backward direction. You can also, we'll be again seeing this, you can also create a side lighting by firing this off the wall. But the important thing is that we are turning this small source of light, because we are not firing it straight at the subject, and we're turning this small source of light into a bigger source of light, and that's where this bouncing feature really comes to the aid of the photographer in turning hard light into soft light. So it's best to just actually practice this in our video. So let's go back and let's start bouncing and creating some soft light. I'll see you there. Alright, so now you know that the first shot was bad because it was hard light, because of the small source pointing directly at our subject. Let's turn it into a larger source by just, swiveling this head and then firing it off the ceiling. That's all we'll be doing. And you don't really have to, again, we are on TTL, so we really don't have to worry about the output. The flash is going to handle that. So let's take this shot. Right, so this time we've got a better looking shot than before. Let's go inside our laptop. Let's look at this soft light shot. All right, so this is the shot that we've got after bouncing our flash off the ceiling, and you can immediately see, if I zoom in here, let's look at the same shadows here. Can you see how soft these shadows are? So when I say the shadows are soft, that means just look at the way the transition is from shadows to highlights. The more softer and the more unnoticeable this transition is, that means not definite, that means you're looking at soft light, and you can see that this just looks soft overall. We've lost that bad looking shadow under her chin. The highlights don't seem too strong. You can see you might have a slightly strong highlight here, but it's so spread out. Compare this with the shot that we took before, which was this one, and you can see here it looks really bad. You can see strong looking shadows and these bad looking highlights, but this shot immediately looks very pleasing to the eye. So the hard light shot and the soft light shot, you can see that this looks really good. So just by bouncing and making our light source larger, we can achieve this shot. But let's say now we want to even improve this particular shot. So maybe what we can do is that maybe bouncing off the ceiling this time was not a very great idea, even though of course we improved our shot. But let's say that we still don't want even a soft shadow like this. Maybe we just want to completely have a nice well-lit subject. Well, in that case, that is again achievable just by changing the direction of the head and firing it from behind us, so that the light comes from in the front and we get a front lit subject. It's better to just show you. So let's go back to our shooting area, and this time we'll just take a shot from a different direction by changing the head of the flash in a different direction. All right, so our last shot was way better than our first shot, but like we learned, we can still improve it because we're not happy with the shadows. Remember, this can move around in any direction. So this time, wouldn't it be better if there was a light coming from the front, and we can actually manufacture that light by actually turning this backwards and going and shooting? Because if I do that, this light is going to hit behind the wall behind me and it's just going to bounce off in front of the onto the subject, and that is just going to take care of those shadows that we were seeing in the last shot. So let's do this. Right, so this shot definitely looks even better than our last shot. So let's take a look. All right, so this time, this is the shot that we've got, and this looks really, really nice and soft. You can see we barely have any shadows here. That's because this is a front lit subject, and just by changing the direction of our head, we're literally creating a light source in front of our subject, and this looks really, really good. There are no unnecessary shadows, even though in the last shot, the shadows were soft, but let's say if you don't want the shadows at all, then of course you can play around with the direction of your head and you can achieve all these different types of looks. Let's just quickly compare it with the last shot. So remember, this is what we started off with. This was the bad hard light shot, then we improved it by bouncing off the ceiling. So this was good in itself, but let's say if we really wanted a different look, then we achieved it by changing the direction and making it front lit. So let's just try one more thing and let's go back to our shooting room. All right, let's just take one more shot. Remember, the flash head can move in any direction. We've tried the top bounce, we've tried it from behind. Also, let's try a side bounce. That's going to create a side lighting, which can also have a nice dramatic look. But of course, anytime you bounce it, the light is going to be soft. That is important. And then you can change the look by changing the direction of the head, and of course, then changing the direction of the light itself. So this time, I'm just going to use this wall on my left, and I'm just going to tilt it on the left, and we just get a different look this time. All right, so this also looks good. Let's check it out. All right, so this is the shot that we've got with the side lighting, and you can see this has a slightly different look. The left side of her face where the flash came from is lit more, the highlights here are more, and it kind of gradually just turns into these shadows on the right side. So this is also a very dramatic look. This also looks good. You can see it here also, but just see the transition. Again, from highlights to shadows, it's barely noticeable. You're not getting any visible shadows, and that's what soft light really looks like. So just feel free to experiment. Photography is very subjective. One person might like something, but there's no doubt that not many people would like the hard light look as compared to the soft light. But once you achieve soft light, there are a lot of variables that you can play around with. All right, so in this video, we learn how to bounce the flash, create a much softer looking and a much more flattering looking light for our subject. Now, one thing is that you might be thinking, but what if I'm not indoors? What if I'm outdoors and I don't have anything to bounce to? In that case, how do I turn this light into soft light? Well, that's a good question, but we'll answer that later in this course, and we'll tackle that later. But for right now, we're done. I'm going to see you in the next video. Bye for now.